Civil War and Reconstruction. The Constitution. Something's missing. The Constitution set up the rules of our government. The first 10 constitutional amendments, called the Bill of Rights, listed the rights that citizens should expect. But when these documents were written, over one-third of the population of the United States was not considered citizens. These were the slaves and free blacks living in the United States. They were born in the U.S., worked in the U.S., and died in the U.S., but were not protected by the founding documents or by state laws. It took a war between the states to bring changes to the Constitution that would end slavery and set a path for greater equality. States taking sides. We don't hear much about new states being added to the United States anymore, but in the early 1800s, several new states were added to the Union. One of the hot topics of the day was whether these new states would allow slavery, like the southern states, or ban it, like most of the northern states. Over time, these two regions had developed in different ways, which led to conflict. Check out the map to see which states allowed slavery and which didn't. Civil War. The debate over slavery and rights was a main factor leading to the bloodiest war in our country's history. The slave states in the South decided they would be better off as a separate nation, so they seceded from the United States. Secession means separation or breaking away. But President Abraham Lincoln did not want the nation to be divided. War began between the southern states, which called themselves the Confederate States of America, and the northern states, which were still known as the United States of America. President Lincoln led the United States during the war. The Confederate States set up their own government and military. This war between the states, now called the Civil War, deeply and bitterly divided America on both sides. Emancipation. In the middle of the war, President Lincoln issued the Emancipation Proclamation, declaring that all slaves in the South were free. Emancipation means freedom. Although it was a huge and important step, it didn't have much immediate effect. It did not help slaves in the South because Confederate States of America had its own government and did not feel bound by proclamations by the United States President. It also did not help slaves in states that had not seceded. Even so, the Emancipation Proclamation was a big deal. Although it failed to free any actual slaves, it did send a strong message. When the war was over, slavery in the U.S. would end. The U.S. government took this as a sign to move forward with additional laws that changed citizens' rights in America. Ending the war, ending slavery. In January 1865, 3 months before the war ended, Congress passed the 13th Amendment to the Constitution, outlawing slavery in the United States. The war ended when the Confederacy surrendered in April 1865. After that, all states were once again part of the United States of America. In December 1865, slavery was finally abolished in the entire United States when the last state ratified, or passed, the 13th Amendment. Reconstructing a nation. President Abraham Lincoln was said to have saved or preserved the Union by winning the war to keep all the states together. But when the war left much of the South destroyed and disorganized, the southern states needed to be made part of the United States again. The new president, Andrew Johnson, believed the southern states should be let back into the U.S. with no consequences. But many in Congress wanted to make sure the southern politicians were punished for seceding. They also didn't want southern politicians to interfere with the new freedom of African Americans. This period of rebuilding after the Civil War is known as Reconstruction. Many in the South resisted the changes, and the federal government had to send troops to enforce the new civil rights laws. Changing the Constitution. The 13th Amendment did not end the former slaves' troubles. Many southern states quickly passed laws to restrict what little freedom the former slaves had. Something more was needed to expand and protect the rights of the former slaves. As part of the Reconstruction effort, Congress added 2 more amendments to the Constitution. In 1868, the 14th Amendment guaranteed citizenship to all people born in the United States. This amendment also gave all citizens the right to due process and equal protection under the law. In 1870, the 15th Amendment gave all men the right to vote regardless of their race or whether they had been slaves before the war. Due process. Due process means that people have the right to be treated fairly by the government. There are 2 kinds of due process. One has to do with what the law actually says. Laws must be fair and reasonable. The government cannot pass laws that unfairly limit people's life, liberty, or property. The other type of due process has to do with how laws are enforced. Government officials must make sure must follow certain rules or procedures when they enforce laws. They cannot take away or limit someone's life, liberty, or property without following those rules. Equal protection. Equal protection under the 14th Amendment means the government must treat people equally. Unreasonable discrimination by the government is not allowed. If a law does treat one group of people differently, the government must prove there's a good reason for it. Courts will decide if that reason is good enough to let the law stand. Both equal protection and due process were rights that African Americans lacked due to their race and former state of slavery. By granting these rights, as well as the right to vote, the Constitution expanded citizenship to a whole new group of Americans. Here's what you need to do to make sure you finish everything today. First thing, take the quiz. You know the deal. 3 questions, 6 points total. 1 point just for answering a question, 2 points for getting it right, 0 points for not getting it done on time. Open book, open note, and open internet. Find the answers where you need, but I recommend going back and listening to the video to find answers. Then we need to complete the review activities. They're checked for completion, and answers are provided on the following slides, along with guidance and instructions to find the correct answers. So make sure that you are following along with everything that happens on the next couple slides, and we get our work done on time. And let's take care of our review activities for today. We'll start with vocabulary. Use the word bank to complete each sentence. Our words are due process, secession, Emancipation Proclamation, equal protection, and Reconstruction. Number 1, in the blank, Lincoln announced that all slaves in the South were free. So that keyword there is free. What talks about freedom? Well, we know that the Emancipation Proclamation was a really, really big deal that, in theory, freed the slaves. So we're going to use the Emancipation Proclamation. The period of rebuilding after the Civil War was called blank. Well, the key word there is rebuilding. So use that word rebuilding to help you pick the correct word from up top. I'm going to help you out and pick out the keyword for our next one. The blank crisis occurred when 11 southern states declared their independence from the United States. And that important one is declared their independence. By declaring their independence, what were they doing? They were doing something, and pick from those remaining words. All right, our next one talks about taking sides. Match the quote with who probably said it. So we're talking about northern abolitionists, people who didn't like slavery, a southern slave owner, or a poor southern farmer. Let's look at that first one. I grow cotton, but I can't afford to own slaves. If they are freed, they might try to take my job. So who would be mostly concerned about that? Well, the abolitionists in the North, there's no slavery going on. A southern slave owner, I don't think they're too worried about competing, so I'm going to go with the poor southern farmer. Next one. I think slavery is terrible. Slavery is not needed and should be illegal. The government needs to do something about this. So if you look at here, the biggest thing is saying slavery is illegal. So would the abolitionist who's against slavery or the southern slave owner who benefits from slavery, who would say that? The last one, slaves are necessary to my cotton business. The government shouldn't tell me how to run my plantation. So you can use process of elimination to figure that one out. And our last one for this part, Confederacy or Union. Connect the person or term with the correct side of the war. So we have the North, the United States of America, and we have the South, the Confederate States of America. So I'll start with the first one, President Abraham Lincoln. Well, that should be really easy. That's going to be the North. A couple other things we're going to try to match are the soldier nickname, Billy Yank, which was a nickname for a Yankee. We have President Jefferson Davis, the national capital of Richmond, Virginia, a soldier nicknamed Johnny Reb or Rebel, and the national capital of Washington, D.C. So another easy one is Johnny Reb. You think about a rebellion, somebody who's leaving a country. Well, the Confederate States were the army that was rebelling against the United States.